Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Camila Marshall, and welcome to the last session of Celebrate Black Broadway Artists. Every Friday for the month of February, my mother, Stevi Meredith, has been taking us on little 30-minute journeys through the history of Black musicals and Black artists. Tonight, in our last session, we're going to take a look at the modern classics, Ragtime, Jelly's Last Jam, The Color Purple, Scottsboro Boys, and everybody's favorite, Hamilton. So now, here is my mother, Stevi.
Well, good evening. And thank you, Camila, for your most gracious introduction. And thank you to all of you who have settled in for what is our last class celebrating Black History Month and the contributions of Black Broadway. I personally would like to thank the Musical Theater West Equity and Inclusion Committee for all their support on this undertaking. And Paul Garman, the king of Musical Theater West, thank you for, well, everything. And lastly, a huge thank you to Bryn Thor and Michael Betts. You know how much I adore you. So let's get started. Jelly's Last Jam is a jazz biography with a book by George C. Wolfe, lyrics by Susan Birkenhead, and music by Jelly Roll Morton and Luther Henderson, based on the life and career of Ferdinand Joseph Lamothe, also known as Jelly Roll Morton, and generally regarded as one of the primary driving forces behind the introduction of jazz to the American public in the 20th century. It also serves as a social commentary on the African American experience during that era. George was hired by the producers in 1987 to write the book of the musical, originally titled Mr. Jelly Lord, after two previous writers had parted company with the producers over artistic differences. One of those writers was August Wilson. Wolfe wasn't interested in writing another toe-tapping retrospective of Black American music. His goal was a moral tale about the Black heritage that Jelly did not acknowledge. And boy, did he deliver. The play opens with the recently deceased Morton in a state of limbo, looking back at his life. He is reluctantly guided by the mysterious chimney man who forces him to recall the more painful moments of his life when he attempts to ignore or embellish them. Forced to go on the road, Morton becomes a prominent composer and musician, and the self-proclaimed creator of jazz. His sadness over his family's rejection of him causes him to stress his Creole ancestry and claim there were no Black notes in my song. Eventually, his pride and racism cause him to betray his best friend and the woman he loves. In later years, as jazz culture continues to grow, Morton is largely forgotten and reduced to dealing with crooked music publishers and gangsters, eventually dying of a knife wound in the colored wing of a Los Angeles hospital. At the moment of his death, Morton at last admits to his heritage. Ain't no Black notes in my song. I was wrong. I was wrong. At this moment, the shadows of the people in his life surround him to congratulate him, and Morton takes his place in history among the other jazz legends. Jelly's Last Jam premiered at the Mark Taper Forum in Los Angeles, California, in March of 1991. Directed by Wolfe, Oba Babatunde played Jelly Roll. The production opened at the Virginia Theater on April 26, 1992, and closed on September 5th after 569 performances and 25 previews. The musical was directed by Wolfe and choreographed by Hope Clark, with tap choreography by Gregory Hines and Ted Levy, scenic design by Robert Wagner, costume design by Tony Leslie James, and the lighting was by Jules Fisher. Now I have to take a little departure here and let you know that many years ago, I worked at the Inner City Cultural Center, and you've heard me mention that before. But Hope Clark and George Wolfe were actually, we were all together in that building doing various things. And it was a great pleasure to get to know both of them, and an awesome pleasure to see them move on to different things. In addition to Gregory Hines and Savion Glover as the older and younger Morton, the cast included Ken Ard, Ruben Santiago Hudson, Tanya Pinkins, Mary Bond Davis, and Keith David. Eventually, Felicia Rashad and Brian Stokes Mitchell and Ben Vereen would join the cast later in the run. Nominated for 11 Tony Awards, including Best Musical, Best Book of a Musical, Best Original Score, Direction, Choreography, Scenic Design, Costume Design, and Lighting Design. The Night's Tonys went home with Gregory Hines for Leading Man in a Musical, and Tanya Pinkins for Featured Actress in a Musical, and Jules Fisher for the Lighting Design. In 1991, interviewed by Hilary DeVries for the Los Angeles Times, Wolfe said of Morton, "Jelly was a gifted musician in a time in this country when racism was very pronounced." He continued, "His whole approach seemed to be, if I decide not to be Black, then maybe I won't be treated like a Black." The show is about how we all use our vanity to cover up our fear, to make ourselves invulnerable. But if you create something extraordinary, and Jelly Roll did, you come from a place, a context, says Wolfe, and you must honor that in some way. You must honor the source. The show is not Morton's life story, but his personality, says Wolfe during a break in rehearsal, and the contents of his soul dictate the presentations. Jelly's culture, his language, his rhythms, his arrogance, even the way he dressed was Black American, says Wolfe. He drinks from the vine of syncopation, but denies the Black soil from which he is born. Calling on other cultural traditions in the musical's finale, where Morton finds redemption by dancing the bambula, a dance style long popular in New Orleans, a city which Wolfe says had a very pronounced African traditions, one of the few cities in the country where the slaves were allowed to keep their drums. Dancing the bambula, says Wolfe, is Jelly's ultimate acknowledgement of those African origins that are floating inside of him, coming to terms with who he really was. Now, Jelly Roll Morton was by no means a saint. He began his career working in brothels, and over its 30-year recourse, he would nearly go broke, losing large sums at horse tracks. At one point, even selling his diamond tooth insert. He kind of was like some of the rappers today with that tooth thing. He was boastful and arrogant, and the exaggerated tales of his legacy are still being untangled by jazz historians. Aside from the gambling and prostitutes, doesn't the description of Jelly Roll ring reminiscent of certain self-proclaimed hip-hop artist come fashion designer? I'm not saying any names, but it makes me wonder how we'll remember our current Black icons. But it also reminds me of an attitude that seems to linger when it comes to Black men recognizing their worth. Humility is a virtue, but an unyielding confidence, especially during times when society seeks to dehumanize you and degrade you, is essential in building your own success. In 1938, Jelly was stabbed by the Jungle Inn's owner's friend. He was declined treatment by a local whites-only hospital and transported to a colored hospital further away, where he was left untreated for several more hours. After this, Morton developed asthma and was often ill. He blamed his illness on a voodoo curse cast on him by his grandmother when he was a child. That's that New Orleans influence. Jelly Roll moved to California in 1939, where he hoped he'd find some relief in the warmer climate. On July 10th, 1941, He passed away in a colored Los Angeles hospital. At his funeral, no music was played, and he was buried in a pauper's grave. Although most jazz historians and experts agree that Jelly Roll's presence in early jazz has been downplayed, he has received some post-mortem dues. In the 1990s, his life and musical career became the topic of the very Broadway musical we're speaking of, Jelly's Last Jam. He's been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he was elected a charter member of the Jeanette Records Walk of Fame. In 2008, Jelly Roll was inducted into the Louisiana Music Hall of Fame. So he had a very storied career, and we see that George Wolfe took his career, his boastfulness, and his denial of being Black and shaped a really colorful but dark musical. Let's move on to The Color Purple. The Color Purple is a musical with a book by Marsha Norman and music and lyrics by Brenda Russell and Ailey Willis and Stephen Bray. Based on the 1982 novel of the same name by Alice Walker and its 1985 film adaptation, the show follows the journey of Celie, an African-American woman in the American South from the early to the mid-20th century. The Color Purple was originally workshopped by the Alliance Theater in Atlanta, making its world premiere on September 9th, 2004. The musical opened on Broadway at the Broadway Theater on December 1st, 2005. It was directed by Gary Griffin, produced by Scott Sanders, Quincy Jones, and Oprah Winfrey, with choreography by Donald Byrd and musical direction by Linda Twine. The musical closed on February 24th, 2008, after 30 previews and 910 regular performances. The Broadway production recouped $11 million investment within its first year on Broadway and has grossed over $103 million by the time it closed. $11 million to produce the show. If you remember back to last week when we talked about The Wiz, we thought 1.1 million was astronomical. The original Broadway production starred LaChanze as Celie, Brandon Victor Dixon as Harpo, Felicia P. Fields as Sophia, Renee Elise Goldsberry as Nettie, Kingsley Leggs as Mr., and Krisha Marcano as Squeak. Oh yeah, let's not forget Elizabeth Withers Mendez. She was Suge Avery. Nominated for 11 Tonys, the single win went to LaChanze for her portrayal of Celie. The Color Purple experienced 3 national tours, including an extended run in Chicago and 1 non-union tour. The first international production, directed by John Doyle, opened in London at the Meniere Chocolate Factory on July 17, 2013. The limited run ended on September 14th, but the cast included Cynthia Erivo as Celie, Nicola Hughes as Suge, and Christopher Coloquin, Mr. On July 9th, 2015, the producers, Scott Chandler, Roy Furman, and Oprah Winfrey, announced that the Meniere Chocolate Factory production from London would be mounted on Broadway. Jennifer Hudson would make her Broadway debut in the role of Suge. Danielle Brooks would play the role of Sophia, and Cynthia Erivo would reprise her role as Celie. Previews began November 10th, and the official opening being December 10th at the Bernard B. Jacobs Theater. Erivo won the 2016 Tony for Best Actress in a Musical, with the production taking home the 2016 Tony Award for Best Revival of a Musical. The production closed on January 8, 2017, after 30 previews and 449 performances. Excuse me. Okay, is anyone keeping track? Because Cynthia Erivo has a Daytime Emmy for her performance with the cast on the Today Show, a Grammy for the 2016 win for the Color Purple cast album, and a Tony, which makes me think all she really needs is that Oscar, right? On November 2nd, 2018, it was announced that a film adaptation of the musical was in development at Warner Brothers Pictures and Amblin Entertainment, the same companies that made the 1985 film adaptation of the novel with Steven Spielberg, Quincy Jones, and Scott Sanders and Oprah Winfrey all signed on to produce. On August 24th, 2020, it was announced that Marcus Gardley will pen the screenplay. And if you don't know Marcus Gardley, you need to Google him. Alice Walker, Rebecca Walter, and Christy McCosco Krieger will all executive produce. And it's said that the film will be released on December 20th, 2023. So we have a little while to wait for that. They had me at Marcus Gardley writing the screenplay. In the 35 years since the release of The Color Purple, the evolution of The Color Purple has taken it from controversy to classic. The now largely forgotten Tony Brown, who for years hosted Tony Brown's Journal, a Black issues-oriented program once seen weekly on PBS, even dedicated an entire show to denouncing the film. Brown called The Color Purple the most racist depiction of Black men since the birth of a nation and the most anti-Black family film in the modern era. Even before the film's release, there was controversy about the white director Steven Spielberg directing the film. While some objected to Spielberg specifically, others lamented that it even took a white director of his caliber to even get the film largely made. These were those then there were those Black women who were included, objected to Suge and Celie's relationship. Other themes included incest and violence against women. Largely positive reviews and stellar box office performance didn't quite end the controversy either, especially after The Color Purple garnered an impressive 11 Academy Award nominations, but won none. I have to confess that I wondered how such a dark story could become a musical. It should be noted that also Alice Walker received a Pulitzer Prize for her 1982 novel that inspired the film and subsequently the Broadway productions. Yeah, I wasn't on board with that at first because I just thought the film was so dark. The book was so dark. I read the book first. And I just didn't understand how it was going to make a musical, which I think speaks to the power of music. I think people go to the theater and they watch a musical and they literally fall in love with the music. And so a lot of what the true story is sometimes escapes audience members. And that brings me to the Scottsboro Boys. It's a musical with a book by David Thompson, music by John Kander, and lyrics by Fred Ebb. Based on the actual Scottsboro trials, the musical is one of the last collaborations between Kander and Ebb prior to the latter's death. Owing its direction and choreography to Susan Stroman, the musical has a framework of a minstrel show, altered to create a musical social critique with a company that, except for one, consists entirely of the African-American performers. Let's go back. In 2002, Stroman first met with Thompson, Kander, and Ebb. The team began to research famous American trials and found the Scottsboro Boys trials, which they thought was a story that needed to be told. After Ebb's death in 2004, the project was put on hold. However, in 2008, Kander reapproached Stroman and Thompson, and the project continued. Kander finished writing the lyrics in Ebb's place. Original Broadway cast was comprised of Joshua Henry, Coleman Domingo, Forrest McClendon, James T. Lane, Josh Breckenridge, Kendrick Jones, Julius Thompson III, Christian Dante White, Rodney Hicks, Jeremy Gums, and Derek Coby. Sharon Washington played the only woman, and John Collum as the show's only white player. The original off-Broadway production received mostly positive reviews. The New York Post, Elizabeth Vincentelli, referred to it as a masterwork, both daring and highly entertaining. The book score and the staging are so organically linked you can't imagine one without the other. But reviews for the Broadway production were mixed. While the show received mostly positive reviews, the Wall Street Journal called the show a musical that slathers this terrible tale in a thick coat of musical comedy frosting that has been spiked with cheap elephantine irony. I can't imagine a nastier tasting recipe. Wow, that was kind of bold. John McWhorter of the New Republic panned the production, writing that ideally this would be a piece that grappled with the real story of the Scottsboro Boys, a rich one driven by the conflicting impulses of the desperate people with conflicting agendas. But the musical paints it in such broad strokes that it's hard to engage with it on any substantial level. McWhorter continued that if this thing were about Haymarket or Tiananmen Square, we'd never have heard of it. The only reason the Scottsboro Boys has made it to the Great White Way is the Great White Guilt. The score was generally well received by critics, with the Associated Press review saying Kander's melodies are effortless, pouring out in a variety of styles from the cakewalk to folk ballad to comic ditty. Ebb died in 2004, but here his clear, precise, and often quite funny lyrics have been finished by Kander, and the transitions are seamless. McWhorter, however, disagreed, writing, one of John Kander and Fred Ebb's least celebrated scores, Steel Pier, is like Porgy and Bess compared to this one. So as you can see, there was quite a lot going on with the Scottsboro Boys. The musical began previews on Broadway on October 7th, 2010 at the Lyceum Theater and officially opened on October 31st, directed and choreographed by Susan Stroman. The set design was Beowulf Borrett, costume design, Tony Leslie James. Didn't we just hear that name when we were talking about Jelly Jam? Lighting design, Ken Billington. Sound design, Peter Halinski. Orchestrations by Larry Hochman and musical arrangements by Glenn Kelly. By early November, people gathered outside the Lyceum to protest the Scottsboro Boys, arguing that the use of minstrelsy and blackface, that's a crazy word, blackface were racist. Stroman said she was disappointed that the protesters, who probably had not seen the musical, had misunderstood that the creators were not celebrating the minstrel show, but rather using it to reveal the evils of the system. Weisler said the minstrel show is not to demean or degrade anybody, but rather that it houses the story we're trying to tell. The production closed on December 12th, 2010, after 29 previews and 49 regular performances. So it wasn't able to sustain itself on Broadway. Controversy notwithstanding, the Scottsboro Boys was nominated for 12 awards, but had no wins, following in the footsteps of two other Kander and Ebb shows. Steel Pier had 11 nominations and no wins, and Chicago had 11 nominations and no wins. An original cast recording was released by J Records on April 23rd, 2010, featuring the off-Broadway cast. The London cast recording was released on May 26th. Before we leave this one, I want to say a few words about the actual Scottsboro Boys. The Scottsboro Boys were 9 African American teenagers, ages 12 to 19, accused in Alabama of raping 2 white women in 1931. The landmark set of legal cases from the incident dealt with racism and the right to a fair trial. The case included a lynch mob before the suspects had even been indicted, all-white juries, rushed trials, and disruptive mobs. It is commonly cited as an example of a miscarriage of justice in the United States legal system. The Scottsboro Boys were Roy Wright, age 12, Andy Wright, age 19, Eugene Williams, age 13, Haywood Patterson, age 18, Clarence Norris, age 19, Charlie Weems, age 19, Olin Montgomery, age 17, Ozzie Powell, age 16, and Willie Roberson, age 16. Okay, here we go. Ragtime. Ragtime is a musical with music by Stephen Flaherty, lyrics by Lynn Ahrens, and a book by Terrence McNally. It is based on the 1975 novel by the same name by E.L. Doctorow, a very big novel. Requires a commitment to read it. Set in the early 20th century, Ragtime tells the story of 3 groups of people in the United States. African Americans, represented by Cole House Walker Jr., a Harlem musician. Upper-class suburbanites, represented by Mother, the matriarch of a white upper-class family in New Rochelle, New York. And Eastern European immigrants, represented by Tate, a Jewish immigrant from Latvia. The show also incorporates a few historical figures such as Harry Houdini, Evelyn Nesbit, Booker T. Washington, and Emma Goldman. The musical had its world premiere in Toronto, where it opened at the Ford Theatre for the Performing Arts on December 8th, 1996. It was produced by Canadian impresario Garth Dubinsky and Livent Incorporated, the Toronto-based company he headed. The U.S. premiere was at the Shubert Theater in Los Angeles in June of 1997. Remember the Shubert? I love that theater. The musical opened on Broadway on January 18, 1998, as the first production in the newly opened Ford Center for Performing Arts, directed by Frank Galati and choreographed by Graciela Danielle. The original cast, including Brian Stokes Mitchell, Maisie Marin Maisie, Peter Friedman, and Audra McDonald, who were all nominated for Tonys. Ragtime rates among the most expensive musicals to produce, especially in the 90s, costing roughly $10 million, a mere pittance by today's standards. Ragtime closed on January 16, 2000, after 834 performances. It did have a little comeback at the Kennedy Center, which ran for a limited run. And then more recently, I saw Ragtime at Musical Theater West, a very fine production featuring Teron Brooks. Okay, I'm for some reason I'm really long-winded this week. So we're going to go right to my last one, which is what? Hamilton. Hamilton, American musical by Lin-Manuel Miranda, tells the story of American founding father Alexander Hamilton. Miranda said he was inspired to write the musical after reading the 2004 biography, Alexander Hamilton, by Ron Chernow. The show draws heavily from hip-hop as well as R&B, pop, soul, and traditional style show tunes. It casts people of color as the country's founding fathers and other historical figures. Miranda described Hamilton as about America then as told by America now. From its opening on Off-Broadway, people have gone nuts for this musical. After seeing the show, I could see why. The original workshop cast, only three principals went on to do the off-Broadway show. And out of that, the original off-Broadway cast moved to Broadway, except for Brian Darcy James. At the 2016 Tony Awards, Hamilton received a record-breaking 16 nominations and won 11 awards. So that was a fantastic evening. And actually, one of our friends won the award for Best Featured Actress. That was Renee Elise Goldsberry. So it was quite an evening for us. Let's talk about the way this show is cast. Hamilton is widely known for its casting diversity. Miranda said that the portrayal of Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and other white historical figures by Black, Latino, and Asian actors should not require any substantial suspension of disbelief by audience members. Our cast looks like America looks now, and that's certainly intentional, he said. It's a way of pulling you into the story and allowing you to leave whatever cultural baggage you have about the founding fathers at the door. He noted, we're telling the story of old dead white men, but we're using actors of color, and that makes the story more immediate and more accessible to a contemporary audience. I don't know, but I think that more productions are going to go in that direction. So do we have any burning questions or comments in the chat? What's happening over there? Michael, are you going to jump in and say anything? Like, what would I do without?
Have I been summoned?
Yes, you have.
Speaking of old white men, thanks, Stevi Meredith. Everybody, please, like Stevie said, put your questions in the chat. Brent will put them up on the screen, and we'll have Stevie answer them. It's so cool. Paul just said he saw it when it rolled through the Orange County Performing Arts Center, Hamilton, that is, and he said it was incredible. Stevie, what was your favorite part when you finally saw Hamilton?
It was a lot of emotions. I mean, I was there, I was seeing friends on stage, so that always, sort of takes over. But I also just loved, I think, the brotherhood that some of the people created when they were going through the Revolutionary War and really trying to structure what this country was going to be. They had sort of a brotherhood camaraderie that was obviously very enviable today with our people that are in charge. So that was one of the things that really captured me. I was very sad because one of the things that made me sad was that, Hamilton and Angelica, they didn't get to be a couple. I was very sad about that. Although he was happy, but then he cheated with some random person. He didn't even cheat with Angelica. He cheated with some random person. I was very struck by how wordy the songs were. A lot of words. So I was really impressed that the actors managed to get those out. We probably should talk a little bit about how much it costs to go see that show.
But the cool thing is how many New York City kids they're busing in to performances, not in COVID times, but how that's part of the whole package, and the producers agreed to that, which is amazing. Yes,
it is. Gail posted in the chat, immigrants, we get the job done. That was one of my favorite lines. I loved it.
Okay, Steve, now I'm going to do what I do every week, and I'm going to put a gun to your head. What's your favorite?
Out of this week?
Out of this week, what's your favorite?
It's toss-up between Hamilton and Jelly's Last Jam, or Jelly Jam, as I call it. I like Jelly Jam because I know Hope, I know George C. Wolfe, and so that kind of, makes it kind of close to home. But the stories are really super dark.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I'm a fan. I'm still not on board with Scottsboro Boys. I think you have to know what happens when you bring minstrels in front of Black people. And so thereby being, people outside protesting because they didn't think it was the right thing. And the white creative team thought, this is a great idea. This is going to make it great. So I think, had there been maybe somebody Black on the creative team, they could have maybe steered them in a little bit different direction. There's just something about seeing the minstrel that just Black people we're not receptive. The voices were powerful. The performances were powerful. But it still made it a little too shucking and jiving to be a real story about the Scottsboro Boys.
Now, when you saw Jelly, did you
we are...
Oh, we're out of time. Oh, we're way out of time. But I wanted to ask, did you get to see Gregory Hines do Jelly?
Or we're way out of time. So. Yes.
Okay.
I did.
His brother did it on tour. Maurice did it on tour.
Oh, okay.
So I saw his brother Maurice Hines do it on tour. So
okay.
We're out of time.
I love
y'all.
That.
Everybody give Stevie your love.
I know.
Like this is it. This is the end of our February classes. We've got other stuff planned, other stuff coming up. Please stay tuned into our social media, Musical Theater West social media. Please stay tuned onto our website, musical.org. How easy is that website? Musical.org. It's the coolest thing ever. Please donate if you love this class tonight. Go to musical.org/celebrate and donate. All the proceeds from this month go directly to our teaching artists, so we can thank Stevie monetarily for being here, which is pretty cool.
Don't forget to tell me about Grayson's class.
Oh, do you think I wasn't
going to about Grayson's class tomorrow?
Last. I'm leaving that for last. Grace Ann Kingsbury, if you're a Musical Theater West audience member, you saw him as Shakespeare in Something Rotten, and he was fierce. But he's done 11 Broadway shows. Catch Me If You Can, Once on This Island, both color purples. He's an Emmy winner and a Grammy winner, and he is teaching a class based on George Faison tomorrow. And George was the choreographer of what? The Wiz.
The Wiz.
So we're going to do a little Ease on Down the Road tomorrow. Can't wait. It's going to be so much fun. Tomorrow, 11 o'clock here. It's a Fitting Way. I hope you guys have gotten to see all of our icons of the day and everything we've been doing this month. We will, Bren, can I leak that in a few days, not at the beginning of the month, but in a few days, we'll be starting another campaign for Women's History Month. And I hope you join us for that because we're really excited, and it's lots of cool people. We're showcasing the professions, some of the professions in musical theater. So rather than spotlighting a person, we're going to talk about female directors and female lighting designers and female orchestrators and female, literally, I put Gail Meredith, the head of our CEI committee, on Trudy Rittman. If you are a musical theater nerd like me and you don't know who Trudy Rittman is, look her up. It will blow your mind. So, and Stevie, it's such a love fest. When we gotta have you back.
Thank you so much for having me. I just like to say, theater is a place of healing, a magical place with a bit of imagination. We can cast a spell that will entertain and educate, a spell that will transform the already is into what will be, a spell that will allow us to see not only what we were, but what we can become. With that, thank you guys so much for having me.
Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Join us tomorrow. Thank you, Stevie.